Hello and welcome to the 16th edition of the Assises du Journalisme de Tours, organized by the French Association Journalism and Citizenship. Today we have the pleasure to receive several guests to discuss about the situation of the journalist media in the MENA region, and also about the role of the media support program implemented by the different donors and organizations of the media development. So we received today Bayan Al-Fadel, who is the project manager at Internews for the MENA region. We receive Mr. Manar Rashwani, Syrian journalist based in Paris and correspondent for the SAHAFA-MED project. We receive Jonathan Dagger, a Lebanese journalist working for Reporters Sans Frontières as the head for the Middle East. And we receive also Ali Marfoud, Libyan journalist based in France. And we expect Mabrouka Kedir, a Tunisian journalist who launched recently a new online media in Tunisia dedicated to environmental issues. So maybe the first question for you, Jonathan. Journalism in the Arab countries, how are you? How is journalist?
I would have liked to answer optimistically to this question, but unfortunately that wouldn't be accurate. The situation is bad. Most Arab countries have very dangerous environments and atmospheres for journalists, and of course there are different contexts for these different situations. In some countries we talk about war and conflict, in others we talk about dictatorships and oppression, in others we talk about assassinations and chaos. So the situation is bad, and unfortunately we don't have signs that it is getting better. In fact, we are seeing a trend of increasing repression, increasing censorship, more journalists being arrested, more journalists being killed, more journalists being kidnapped or taken hostage. And even those who are free, of course, are constantly living under the guise of that threat, and they know that it's coming. So this translates into a climate of terror where self-censorship is the name of the game. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. So please feel free if you want to add something or to comment. But next question will be for Manar. To be or not to be an independent journalist? That is the question. Do you think it is possible today to be an independent journalist in the Arab countries? Or is it necessary to be in exile to be really independent?
Of course, being independent journalist is something next to impossible in the Arab world recently. But of course, as Jonathan mentioned, now the situation may be the worst I have ever seen or observed in my life in the Arab world. But the other part of the question is also extremely important, because even being in exile doesn't mean that you will be independent. Now, dictators in the Arab world understand the importance of media, and this regional polarization also plays a devastating role in controlling media, controlling journalists, and unfortunately, because of the different priorities in the world now, we have less support for independent journalists from the Middle East. So for all these reasons, I mean, it's not easy to be independent journalist covering the MENA region in general, even if you are in exile. It's so complicated situation, but nevertheless, we know that many journalists still trying hard to be independent, to represent really the people, and to be the voice of those who are marginalized or suppressed in the region. But the bottom line, no, even in exile, you cannot be independent easily. You have to keep fighting always to keep your integrity, objectivity, and being independent.
Thank you, Manar. So within the framework of the SAHAFA-MED initiative, we met during the last 2 years different Libyan journalists, either in Tunis or in Brussels. Ali, how is the situation in Libya for the journalists?
Thanks for having me. It's very, very dark, to be honest. It's really difficult for Libyan journalists to adapt the situation that we're going through right now. It's we're trying to seek all kinds of help to adapt the situation that we're living in, especially with the military groups that are going through all the Libyan territories. We can imagine that we're living among 23 million pieces of gun in Libya, and we're only 6 million people. So you can imagine how much crazy the violence is going through the country right now. And even though we're living in a period of peace, that's actually not really applied to journalists. We're actually living in one of the darkest days in the history of journalism in the country, actually. More darker than the period of the era of Gaddafi.
Who are the, let's say, enemies of the journalists in Libya?
I would say both parties. Both parties hate journalism. You know, the Islamic Party and the military party, they're actually sharing the same element of hatred towards journalists. They don't really want to get involved with any kind of accusations with the international organizations, for example. Every time that there were an investigation about some kind of threat to any Libyan journalist or any person who works in journalism in Libya, they say that this is not real, it didn't happen. But
what about the Libyan citizens? Sorry, because when we met your colleagues, they also told us that sometimes the citizens, they criticize a lot the journalists. They don't really understand what role are playing the journalists in Libya, and they consider that the journalists maybe are more part of the conflict than in serving the interest of the citizens.
Absolutely, I agree with that. They see us like part of the problem, and they think that we are all spies just because we're trying to create something different than the government or the military group's idea. So they see us as part of the war that happened. I don't know what the reasons that led for this idea to be controlled on the mind of people, on the mindset of people, but it's what's going on right now, unfortunately. That's why the majority of people are working undercover when it comes to journalism.
Thank you. So, Bayan, Internews is a very famous media development organization, and Internews has, among different organizations, played a role during the last 10, 12 years in the region with a lot of hope after the Arab Springs, a lot of new media and a lot of opportunities for the journalists. Today, as we have seen with the different words of Manar and Jonathan and Ali, the situation is very different. How do you see the future of media development and international media support in the region?
Thank you very much. That's very important, legitimate question, actually, especially in the situation currently we have. As Jonathan, Ali, and Manar said, the situation there is really a challenge, and with a very, let's say, little amount of money that we can put there, especially all grant issues, and not only the economic situation, not the money, getting the money for these areas is a challenge, rather also how to go there, how to implement projects, keeping the security of journalists are safe. We cannot just go and implement without taking care of their life and their personal security. We can't just tell them yeah, go and do the work, and then there is a lot of many different aspects that we need to take it into consideration before we go there. The situation is really bad. We are trying to develop and work on democracy. This is what we aim for. Media was always as a watchdog, and in these countries, as Ali said, like no one would like to see the truth. No one would like to be targeted. No one. We also face the problem of marginalized group. We face the culture issue with women. It's very hard to, even not only women, like LGBTQ plus, all these small parties, let's say, it's hard to give them a voice to say what they want to say. And it doesn't matter how much work, there are still more to be done. Hopefully one day we'll manage to do that.
Thank you, Bayan. So, no, Mabrouka is with us. Welcome. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Thank you. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Tunisia is a country that has benefited a lot from the international media support since 2011. What do you think about this international media support through different forms, like training, like grants, like what are the results in Tunisia in the media sector?
Okay, so let me introduce myself. My name is Kodir Mabrouka. I am a journalist, freelance journalist from Tunisia, and I am here to participate in a panel to speak about my new media, Cosmos Media, which is a media specialized in environmental issues. About your question, I think that all journalists in Tunisia benefit from international support. I am a trainer with a lot of organizations, Deutsche Welle Academy, Programme PAMT, Appui aux médias tunisiens, for example, and I worked with a lot of journalists in the whole regions in Tunisia. And I think today we give them a lot of background about how to work and how to be innovative in their storytelling stories, for example, in media. So I think that we profit a lot about the content. But the challenge today is how to make your media sustainable. How to have financial support to survive as a media, because after the revolution we had a lot of new media outlets, but they disappeared after the revolution. And now I think there are a lot of journalists who are doing their best to survive with a lot of political, economic, and social challenges. So now we are working with these journalists, and we are helping them pour les accompagner to develop their ways to tell stories and to work on the content and on a lot of topics. And now we are focused, for example, in environmental journalism, and I think that especially associative media profit about these programs, and they succeed today to be a big part of our media outlets in Tunisia. And I think they are now the big alternative for citizens in Tunisia to have media in their area, le journalisme de proximité. So I think that we need more and more training sessions, but we need to change a little bit the system of these international supports, because about my experience as a journalist and as a trainer, I think the big challenge today is how to be sustainable and how to have grants to finance your own media. And unfortunately, in Tunisia, we don't have the support of the government to these media, especially especially associative media. For private media, we have like a commercial aspect, which is really not helpful to work on a good quality of journalism. And I think to be supported by international organizations can help to be independent and to independent for this commercial aspect. So I think we continue to support media. I think that the political situation is not easy anymore, but there are a lot of there are BBC Media Action, there are l'Union Européenne, Deutsche Welle Academy, and they are doing their best, but the approach can be really different than before, because even we work to work for the good quality of journalists and to give them some the content skills, exactly, but they suffer a lot about the economic business model. So now I think we have the opportunity to work on the management of media themselves and how to contribute to help the people behind these media to survive and to continue to work on a good quality of journalistic topics.
Yeah.
Especially investigation, for example, we are talking about investigation today, but it's not easy at all.
Time is running, and we have like maybe 5 minutes remaining. Jonathan, one question, because we are quite pessimistic today, but I was in Lebanon recently, and I met the famous new media like Megaphone, like Daraj, and I had the feeling that there is hope with this media, with young journalists, and they told me also that the young generation, the audiences, are more and more interested when we are talking about independent news. Do you think that there is a real hope with this type of new media in the region, and particularly in Lebanon?
Excuse me. So full disclosure, I used to work with Megaphone, as you know, and the idea for founding and funding such independent media outlets was exactly for that, was to reconnect with audiences. And if I want to talk about other projects that I have like a bit more distance from, I could easily point out the work that's being done by journalists, not just in Lebanon but also in Syria. Where the risk is death. It's not just arrest or kidnapping. It's also death. We can talk about Tunisia or Libya. We can talk about Egypt, which is considered one of the biggest prisons in the world for journalists, and yet we still see independent media outlets such as Mada Masr, for example, publishing and writing. And I mean, of course, we can talk about the Gulf, but I want to focus also on Iran, which has made headlines during the past year as one of the most repressive governments against journalists, because they wanted to try to suppress the information. And what they did was that they went after the journalists who would break important stories that were embarrassing for the government. So for example, this is what we saw with journalist Elahi Mohammadi or Nalifar Hamedi, who first broke the story of the death of Masa Amini. This is what we saw with the journalist Ali Portabatabey, who spoke about the poisoning of young schoolgirls, who covered the story for the first time. And so we see that these journalists immediately get arrested and thrown in prison with extensive sentences. However, it's important to note that they did cover these stories. Despite these dangers, despite these risks, they still took that risk and they still covered that story. And we see that all over the world, from Yemen to Saudi Arabia to Qatar, to Lebanon, to Egypt, to Syria. It's truly, to Palestine also, by the way, where it's truly one of the highest rates of violations. We are overwhelmed by the violations against Palestinian journalists. And it's truly inspiring to see that despite the risks, journalists are still going out there to find the information and to transmit it, and audiences are still looking for that information in order to read it and be informed and to share it. And I mean, I think we started on a bit of a pessimistic note because it really is dangerous for journalists, but I think we could end on a bit more of an optimistic note to say that despite these dangers, despite these risks, journalists will still do their jobs. That I think will always be true. So maybe if we can put out a message, we can say that it's pointless to try to stop them because it's never going to happen. And I think we can all confidently agree on that.
Thank you, Jonathan, for these words. Maybe to conclude, I don't know if anybody wants to add something. If you had, let's say, one or two advice for the donors, for the implementers, about the priorities for the journalists in the region, also about the way the donors or the implementers are working with the journalists. If you have some advice for them, I don't know if somebody wants to... Mabrouka or Ali?
Just to make sure that the donors know exactly what's the goal of their fund, we have to be more clear. We have to deliver the message that we want to send for the public. We have to also tell them that we exist and we will continue doing this for the last day of our lives. This is exactly what they want. They want motivation and they want passion. And I think that we're all, young enough to have so many motivation to continue our path. And that's it.
Thank you. Mabrouka, maybe?
If I have any advice to give to the donors is to help journalists to produce content. Because before we concentrated on training and to develop skills of journalists, and now we need maybe to help them to be to produce more and more content. Even the situation for the freedom of speech in Tunisia is a little bit become more and more difficult than before, to be honest. But we still have a freedom, and I think if we want to develop our content is to develop to help journalists to be to produce. Yeah.
Thank you, Mabrouka. I don't know, maybe Bayan, the point of view of one implementer.
Again, as I said, like there is lots of work to be done there. It's been, I don't know, it's been like decades of oppression, especially for media. Media was very dangerous for any authoritarian regime in that area. I came from that area. I know very well the situation of freedom of expression, and I'm super happy I can talk about all internews programs. Of course, I recently joined with them, but I can say that supporting democracy, supporting freedom of expression has become a passion for me, and I hope, like, not only me, I hope all governmental, even donors, to put Middle East and North Africa as a main target for their fund. There is a lot of work, there is a lot of training, there is a lot of security threat for journalists on their lives, on their families. And honestly, one day I personally hope that all the donors would basically work on one specific target, like, and very big project that we can implement and cover like a huge chunk of, I don't know, but we work slowly and hopefully one day I can say whatever I want inside my country. Of origin, of course.
May I add something?
Take the mic, please.
May I add something? In Tunisia today, official authorities are really out of service. And we need to reorganize laws about media outlets and media authorities, official authorities, because if we speak about HICA, for example, today, they are out of service. The regulatory, exactly. So maybe we can work on this kind of topic too, because we need to regularize. Regularize. It's easy. It's easy in French, but in English it's not easy at all to say it. But really, we need to work with the. I think it's not easy to work with official authorities, but we need to collaborate with them as international organizations to make the regulation better than before, because now we are really lost. if we have problems, we don't know how we can resolve it and via which authority. So it's really a big challenge today, I think. I don't know if you have an idea about the situation in Tunisia, but this one of points too. Thank you.
Time is running and we have to conclude. And to conclude, Manar, I have one question for you. You are a senior journalist. You have a long career in journalism. What do you have to say to your colleagues, independent journalists who are based in the Arab countries now?
I completely agree with what my other colleagues just mentioned. We have to continue fighting because we have to keep our independence at any price. We know that the price could be very, very high. I mean, sometimes people could be in exile. This is not a very big high price comparing to people lose their lives. But nevertheless, it's important, as you mentioned also some examples that could make us optimistic, that we need to make these professional practices established, well established, and to continue our work. And back to the question of the donors also, supporting media in the Arab world on a specific country, it's not related to this very specific country or very specific region. The role of the media actually, especially in our countries, and because of the geography, could affect the security of all the world. And we saw that because of terrorism, because of forcing people to become refugees. So when we support independent media, when we provide the ordinary people with voice, actually we are protecting the security and the safety of the wider region and if not the wider world. So, and this is so important to keep in mind. It's not about prioritizing anything before supporting media, because it's part of the very essential needs for the well-being of the people and the security of the region and the world.
Thank you very much. So time is sorry?
And it's freedom.
Yeah, time is over. No, the next rendezvous will be in Tunis, hopefully in November, for the Assises du Journalisme de Tunis. Thank you very much for attending the Assises du Journalisme de Tours here in France, in the Loire-Vallée, and welcome. And we have to continue all together. Thank you.
Thank you.